It's the boy Blackbeard. I'm back. What's happening? Major salute to all the beautiful people in the Mirage universe. I see y'all out there. What's going on? Just had to take a little time to basically recoup, and I had to go into the silent temple with my higher self. Basically, they had to go through a psychological and emotional transformation. So that's why you brothers and sisters haven't really been seeing me these last few days, but I'm back. Hopefully everything been positive and very, very healthy and good with you. All right. So what we're gonna do in this tape is I want to first salute the brother OG Chris. Shout out to the brother OG Chris, and we're gonna go into some history today, some more Aboriginal history, and basically just kind of add a little bit more to whatever you all know about yourselves here on this American soil. Because what the Aboriginal history information does is it helps you get out of the demonic possession of the whole Negro, Black, African American, and colored mislabels. Anytime you've been walking around and identifying yourself with something that has nothing to do with you, you've been actually entertaining certain frequencies and certain concepts that really you didn't create, okay, and they are really alien to you and your own ancestral blood tie, okay. So like for example, Blackbeard was named by his mother and father, so I'm not going to answer to no name that my mother and father didn't give me. I'm going to answer to who I know I am. So it's the same with us as a people. Yes, they've been calling us African American or Black, but we got to remember that not only did we not make these terms for ourselves, but these are demonic terms, for lack of a better word. And when I say demonic, it's almost like The Exorcist, like how you saw the little girl on The Exorcist was demonically possessed by that spirit, and it had her acting and thinking and behaving a certain way. And the conditioning of the Negro, African American, and Black labels, they're no different than that demon on The Exorcist. They have us acting and behaving in certain ways. For example, salute to the brother David Carroll, because this tape that I'm making also kind of goes with the latest tape he made, because he talked about why the so-called Negro will never control their own economics. And he's right, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of the reasons why is because we don't value people that look like us and what they have to bring to the table. He was talking about how you can have an Asian man selling a hot dog for $3, and and we go in there and buy from him for no problem. But when a brother or sister selling a hot dog, we want to get it at a discount and stuff like that. So that kind of behavior and that type of thinking all comes from demonic possession. That's where that comes from. Those Negro, Black, and African American labels have no respect tied to them. And subconsciously, we know we don't respect them. So anybody we see calling themselves that, we don't respect those people. Even if we call ourselves that, a lot of us don't even respect ourselves. So, salute to the brother David Carroll. And y'all check out his latest tape dealing with the economics of the so-called Negro and why he won't win. I find that to be a very, very good tape. So what we're going to do in this one is we're going to come out of a book called Distinctive Characteristics of the Aboriginal Race of America. Distinctive Characteristics of the Aboriginal Race of America. And once again, just giving you all more insight, more receipts, more references, more bibliography. So when you start trying to, explain to your sons and daughters their true Aboriginal history, you have information to give them, and you have some links and sources to even give them. Also too, like, I'm not giving you all really the Aboriginal information for you to necessarily really even feel good about yourself. It's really to kind of clear up cobwebs, because we've been horribly lied to in this area, and I'm starting to see that there is a slow awakening of people who are starting to acknowledge that they have an Aboriginal American history. So I guess if I could add a little bit to this collective movement that's going on right now to aid in the conscious rising of us. And just put out whatever we can put out for this Aboriginal American thing. I don't mind doing that. But the whole point is that you need to be taking this information and doing it and talking about it with your own family and friends. That's how that goes. That's what Blackbeard is doing. That's why Blackbeard even knows about his Aboriginal blood ties. For example, Blackbeard's mother had been walking around her whole life knowing that she was a Blackfoot Aborigine, because she was told this by an ancestor. But until we were just talking and putting all these things together, having family conversation, because that's what I do with this information, now the whole thing clicks. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of family history and stuff, we're able to get a better understanding of that, because me once again doing a little research in these tapes and books I find, and then I go back and talk with family members and I connect it with what they're saying. and it helps both parties understand more about who we really are. So that's what you all should be doing with your family members and stuff like that. And before I go into this reading, for example, it may have been like last month, but I remember being in a barbershop one time, and the woman who owns it, you know, it's a so-called black woman, but I overheard her talking to another person, and she was saying how her mother is a Cherokee so-called Aboriginal. But if you all were to look at her, you would say this is a so-called black woman. And I just heard that just her having a random conversation with somebody. So this understanding is rising a little bit. You know, what will it equal to? That depends on what we do with it. That depends on what we do with it, you know. So I'm going to go into this reading, you know. Like I said, this book is called Distinctive Characteristics of the Aboriginal Race of America. You know, that's the name of the book. And also another thing, too, y'all going to have to notice that if y'all come in the comment section asking me what's the name of the book, I'm not going to ever answer you. I'm not going to ever answer you. You need to be listening in the tape while I give the resource, and you need to go look in that little description box where I have all those keywords, okay? So the name of this book is called Distinctive Characteristics of the Aboriginal Race of America, all right? Don't even ask me who the author is. Just go look it up. Distinctive Characteristics of the Aboriginal Race of America. So if you really want to know, you'll do the extra extensive work to get this book, because I got it in PDF, so it's easily, you know, accessible to anybody, all right? So what we're going to do is just read a little bit into the physical characteristics of the American Aboriginal. Now, one thing about the American Empire is very, very synonymous, and it has a lot in common with the Egyptian Empire and the Roman Empire. Now, what these three empires have in common, the Egyptian, American, and Roman Empire, is that the indigenous people did start the empire, but as time went on, from different military conquests, from different refugees who had to come to that to that empire to get resources and help, and from different invasions and warfare, and from certain amalgamation, you now have these empires that are made up of different nations and people of different ethnicities. And that's why, for example, people can't tell you who the original Egyptians are, just like they can't tell you who the original Americans are. Because if you look at people in so-called Egypt today, you see a lot of people saying they are Egyptian. You see people that look Arab that say they are Egyptian. You see people that look so-called Negro or black that say that they are Egyptian. Just like in America today, you have so-called black people saying that they are indigenous Americans. And then you have European Caucasians saying that they are Americans. So although we are all, let's say, from the nation of America, some of us don't come from the bloodline of the Americans or from the indigenous people who set up the American Empire. So that's what this whole thing is to get back to the 1828 Webster understanding, the 1828 Webster Dictionary understanding of the word American. Okay, it means the copper-colored races that were here prior to the Europeans. All right. Now, I hope most of us out there are very, very good at knowing what colors are, because I'm going to read some of the descriptions of how these Aboriginal people look. And when we look into the skin tones, I want you to think in your mind how the person looks. So the first example is they tell you that the Americans were a copper-colored people. Okay, so first think in your mind how the color copper looks. And in the minute, I'm going to read a few more descriptions, and I want you to think about how these people look. So the physical characteristics, okay? It is an adage among travelers that he who has seen one tribe of Indians or so-called Americans has seen all. So much do the individuals of this race resemble each other, notwithstanding their immense geographical distribution and those differences of climate which embrace the extremes of hot and cold. The half-clad Fuegian, shrinking from his dreary winter, has the same characteristic lineaments, though in an exaggerated degree, as the Indians of the tropical plains. And these again resemble the tribes which inhabit the region of west of the Rocky Mountains, those of the Great Valley of the Mississippi, and those again with the skirt of the Eskimo of the north. So what this is talking about real quick is that some people, when they came to America, and some people, when they even, let's say, go on Google and look up Native Americans, they will think that the image or the picture they show up is a representation of all the Native Americans or all the so-called Indians. Whereas that is not necessarily the case, because most of the Aboriginal American people come from different, let's say, physical feature backgrounds. Although they're all indigenous people, we all have different backgrounds, and the reason why is because we all come from one of the different 7 genetic bloodlines of the Elohim, believe it or not. All right. Continuing, all possesses alike the long black hair and the brown or cinnamon colored skin, the heavy brow, the dull and sleepy eye, and the full and compressed lips, and the salient but dilated nose. So let's go through this real quick. So first they saying that the Aboriginals of the North of America, although they all different in looks, but they say that they all possess black hair and brown or cinnamon colored skin. So let's repeat this real quick. So the Aboriginal or the Webster's Dictionary of American in 1828 says that American is a copper-colored person that was here prior to the arrival of European. So the first description we have of the American is a copper-colored person. The second description we have right here is people with black hair and brown or cinnamon colored skin. So let's think real quick. The color copper, the color cinnamon, and the color brown all have something in common, okay? They all have something in common, and they all somewhat look a little bit like that, all right? So these are the colors that they are describing, okay? Cinnamon, brown, and copper color, all right? So we're just getting a physical image of how these people look. And then, as I said, they had different hair textures and different nose structures and different eye structures, etc. So this is why, and also some had compressed lips and some had full lips. So that's why you see some of the brothers and sisters, we have more fuller lips. Like if you look at the Olmec statues, and then you have some of the Aboriginal tribes whose lips may have not been as full, but they still were indigenous people. But yet and still they both are being labeled as Indian, okay? So that's why we got to be careful with the term Indian, because a lot of you all, when you see that Native American archetype, you will quick to be saying that that's an Indian. But if I show you, let's say, a regular so-called black person, you're not so quick to say that that's an Indian. Not realizing that the original Europeans labeled both of these people Indians. And they both had this cinnamon, bronze, copper colored skin. All right. So we need to get out of this whole, beef about us having different hair texture and different nose sizes and basic stuff like that. That stuff is all very, very silly. OK, the Aboriginal people have different hair textures. That's not all the same. But we all come from, like I said, one of the different 7 bloodlines of the Elohim. Okay, one of the 7 different bloodlines of the Elohim. And so the Elohim actually, manifested what we call an Aboriginal indigenous people. So just like you have 7 continents, just like you have the 7 lower chakras, you also have the 7 Elohim. Okay, and these 7 Elohim basically birthed and manifested so-called Aboriginal indigenous people. And we have the different genetic codes from all these different Elohim. So although we all have the different shades of the Aboriginal copper colored earth tone, which is what we call brown, cinnamon, and copper, but we may have other features that are a little bit different, such as hair texture, etc. So just because somebody has a different hair texture does not mean that they are not Indian or an American or a so-called black person. All right. Now, the other reason why I'm going into this too is because when you look on a lot of the let's say applications and stuff like that, let's say for people who put black as their race, you're going to see a lot of different people put black that do not look the same. And the reason why is because they all come from, basically they come from the same nation, but they come from different tribes, let's say. So we all are indigenous American people, but we come from different tribes. So, we have different fathers, let's say, but all our fathers come from the same nation. Okay. So it's just like, let's say, with the Hebrews in the Old Testament, you had different patriarchs. You know what I'm saying? You had different fathers of different Hebrews, but all these fathers were Hebrews. You know what I'm saying? So this what made all their offspring Hebrews. Now, although these people may have been mixing with some other people who may have not been Hebrews, but nevertheless, because of their father and the blood type being passed down through the father, this made them Hebrew. Okay. So everybody that's saying that they are so-called black, what they're really saying is that they come from the seed of an Aboriginal man. Now what bloodline or what, Elohim this Aboriginal man comes from, who knows? But everybody that's calling themselves black, what they're saying is that they had come from a male ancestor who was Aboriginal, who was an Aboriginal man. Okay, that's essentially what they're saying. All right. So continuing on. Now, listen up to this. It says that these traits, moreover, are equally common to the savage and civilized nations. Now, one thing I find very, very common in a lot of these, books written by these Europeans, whenever they use the word savage, they are always referring to so-called Negro or black people. Let me repeat. Whenever they use the word savage, they are always referring to Negro or so-called black people. I'll give you an example. The British occultist by the name of Aleister Crowley, when he had his initiation under the Silver Star, when he basically called up Aiwass, and he gave his description of Aiwass, he said that Aiwass had the body of veiled incense. He said his body was in an incense-like pattern. And he said that he had the face of a savage king. Now, sometimes you'll see that it'll say he said he had the face of a savage king, and sometimes it'll say he had the face of an African king. So what this is showing you is that the word African and savage is synonymous. So when they saying right here that, moreover, these traits are all common with the savage nations, what this is saying is that most of the indigenous people of the planet have brown, cinnamon, or copper colored skin. That's basically what that is saying. So, like I was telling you about the demonic possession, these words like savage, African, Negro, Indian, they basically are all these words that these invading colonial colonizers used to basically, call the same person all these different names. And that's why you get confused. So I'll give you an example. Let's take Blackbeard for an example. They would have, if I was walking around, let's say in 1522, let me tell you everything they would have labeled me. They would have labeled me a Moor. They would have labeled me as a Negro. They would have labeled me as an Indian. They would have labeled me as a Carolinian. They would have labeled me probably as a Seminole. You see what I'm saying? You see all these different labels that they would have given me. But nevertheless, I'm the same man and I look the same. So it's not necessarily that the labels are talking about different people. It's that the same person is being called multiple things. That's how that goes, okay? So let's continue and keep it going. Let's listen up. It cannot be questioned that physical diversities do occur, equally singular and inexplicable, as seen in different shades of color, varying from a faint tint to a complexion almost black. Let me repeat. It cannot be questioned that physical diversities do occur, as seen in different shades of color, varying from a fair tint to a complexion almost black. So it's just like Aboriginal people. If I look on your application and it says black, guess what? You're going to have copper colored people that's going to put that. You're going to have jet dark skinned people that's going to put that. You're going to have light skinned people that's going to put that. You see what I'm saying? So just because you say that you are a so-called black person, it's not going to really identify how you may physically look. We know who your father is when you say that you are a black person, but we don't necessarily know how you look. All right. Like, for example, if a lot of you all saw my sister, you would not think she was black. You all would think that either she's mixed or she's Native American, but she's the same as the rest of us. Okay. Moving on. So it says, so also in reference to stature, the differences are remarkable in entire tribes, which moreover are geographically proximate to each other. These facts, however, are mere exceptions to a general rule and do not alter the peculiar physiognomy of the Indian, which is as undeviatingly characteristic as that of the Negro. Let me repeat. These facts, however, are mere exceptions to a general rule and do not alter the peculiar physiology of the Indian, which is as undeviatingly characteristic as that of the Negro. So what they're saying right here is that essentially what they're saying is that the characteristics of the Negro and the physicality of the Indian do not deviate. What they're saying is that the Indian and the Negro basically look the exact same. That's what they're saying right here. Continuing. So it says that these facts, however, are mere exceptions to a general rule and do not alter the peculiar physiology of the Indian, which is as undeviatingly characteristic as that of the Negro. For whether we see him in athletic Carib or the stunned Kaima, in the dark Californian or the fair Boroa, he is an Indian still and cannot be mistaken for a being of any other race. So let me repeat this part. So let's slowly go through this. So it says that these facts are mere exceptions to a rule, but they do not alter the physiology of the Indian. Then it says that the Indian does not deviate from the characteristics of the Negro. Then it goes on to say that even if we see him looking like the athletic Caribs or the people of the Caribbean or the dark Californians, he is still Indian and cannot be mistaken for a being of any other race. So what this is saying is that the people of the Aboriginals of California, the Aboriginals of the Caribbean, and the so-called Negro all look the same. I'll give you another example. And a lot of the different letters and stuff I read by the Portuguese and Spanish explorers, whenever they describe the Aboriginal men, they describe us all the exact same way. They describe us the same way that ESPN describes us today. They describe us the same way as the scouts at the NFL's combine describe us today. They talk about our broad chest. They talk about the the different stature and the different sizes of the Aboriginal American men. Because I've noticed one thing about Aboriginal American men, we tend to have a larger muscular structure, I've noticed, than a lot of other men on the planet. Now, I could be wrong with this, but I noticed that the Aboriginal American man seems to be a bigger man in general than a lot of people on the planet. Let's take, for example, the Olympics, and let's take the basketball, for example, in the Olympics. Now, every few years when the Olympics come on for basketball, y'all know Blackbeard is a basketball fan, so I always watch it. Okay, I've been watching it my whole life, and I noticed that when you look at the Americans, the Aboriginal brothers, they are always tremendously larger than a lot of those different European men that they play against. They're always sizably larger than a lot of the Asian men they play against, and they always are significantly larger than a lot of the different amalgamated people in South America that they play against. So if you see a game, let's say, of the Americans versus, let's say, the Argentinians, everybody on the American team is going to look a lot bigger. Like if you look at, let's say, like LeBron James and Kobe Bryant and some of these guys, and then let's say you see them playing against the Chinese team, or just another team from another country, those guys don't seem like they're as big as we are. A lot of them, they may be tall, but they don't have the same muscular structure. So one thing that I see always very, very specific about the Aboriginal American man, especially the North American one, is his muscular structure. And you see this a lot in a lot of the letters that was left behind the Portuguese, and even some of the stuff that Christopher Columbus talked about. They talked about how the men look so, muscular. I mean, a lot of it sounds slick, borderline homosexual, like the way these Europeans were describing the brothers here, but nevertheless, that is a characteristic of us here. So that's why you see him. They describe the Caribs as athletic, because a lot of us here were actually doing a lot of athletic activities and a lot of war games and stuff like that when they came and saw us here. And then they saw our women as well. Now you got to remember too that the Aboriginal woman is the same. Like, she is usually on average more voluptuous than women of other countries. And this is also why they only choose certain type of so-called black women to be the standards of beauty. Because, like, let's say, for example, if they were to choose a so-called black female, like one of these attractive black females in like King magazine, or one of these attractive black females that be like on Instagram or something like that, And let's say they would have put her in like a beauty pageant contest or something like that. I'm talking about them real attractive, voluptuous black women. I don't care what a lot of you all say, but those women are going to blow those other women out of the water. They're going to make those other women look like they haven't even reached puberty yet. And that's just facts. If you take, that's what I'm saying, you take some of these so-called black females and you put them on like that Miss Universe contest, and once again, get a black female with a nice face, but coming with the voluptuousness that a lot of the women, Aboriginal women have. I'm telling you right now, they're going to look a whole lot more mature than those other women from other countries that represent their country. And that's just facts. You know what I'm saying? Like the Caucasian female is built nothing like the Aboriginal woman. She's built nothing like it. Her breast is built nothing like it. Her hips, her behind, nothing. It's nothing like it. So this shows you a certain genetic dominance of Aboriginal people in the West. It's something about us here over in the West. It is, because also just think about, we also even start a lot of the trends. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the other people on other continents, they follow what we do here. Y'all gotta remember, it's folks that play basketball literally in the middle of Africa somewhere, using like a milk crate and like an orange, literally because they see LeBron James and shit like that on TV. Now, although it may be something as mundane as simple as basketball, but nevertheless, they copy everything we do. So what I'm getting at is that the Aboriginal people of North America, we don't really know it, but we are actually the high priest class of the planet. The Elohim, or the spiritual ancestors, actually made us the high priest of the entire planet. And it was done through more of a genetic birthright. So I'm not saying that we're better than everybody based on, skills or anything like that. But as far as, it's something else that's more spiritually distinct about us over here. And this comes from something on a more genetic bloodline from those Elohim. So it may have been, maybe we came from the leader Elohim, maybe, because if it was 7 of them, you better believe that one of them was the leader of all the shit. So maybe we came from the head one, who knows? But there is something very, very special about Aboriginal people in the West, and that's why they give us the most hell, and we got to go through the most confusion. So now let's move on. So just to wrap it up, so it says that the athletic Carib, the dark Californian, the Indian, and the Negro do not deviate a characteristic, and they cannot be mistaken of being any other race. All right. So, y'all keep that in mind. Let's keep it going. So, next it says, this remark is equally applicable to the ancient and modern nations of our continent. For the oldest skulls from the Peruvian cemeteries, the tombs of Mexico, and the mounds of our own country are of the same types as the heads of the most savage existing tribes. What did I tell you all that savage means? Savage means so-called black or Negro or Moor or Aboriginal. So they're telling you right here that the oldest skulls found in the Peruvian cemeteries and the tombs of Mexico are the same types as the heads of the most savage tribes. Now we're going to go deeper into those Mexican complexes in a minute. Their physical organization proves their origin of one to have been equally the origin of all. The various civilized nations are to this day represented by their lineal descendants who inhabit their ancestral seats and differ in no exterior respect from the wild and uncultivated Indians. At the same time, in evidence of their lineage, that the Mexicans and Peruvians yet possess a latent mental superiority which has not been subdued by 3 centuries of despotism. So what this is saying right here is that once again, it's talking about the lineal descent and the ancestral seats. This is where you get your physical organization from. So we are what our ancestors were. You see what I'm saying? So if your ancestor was the Aboriginal American, the Aboriginal, whatever it was, Californian, the Aboriginal Delaware, the Aboriginal people from Peru or whatever. Nevertheless, these are all the same people, and we really ain't, you can't separate them. Continuing. Then it says, the observations of Molina and Humboldt are sometimes quoted in disproof of this pervading uniformity of physical characters. Molina says that the difference between an inhabitant of China or Chile and Peruvian is not less than between an Italian and German. So it's saying right here that you know how you'll have an Italian and a German, and how the physical differences probably don't differ as much. They're saying it's kind of the same for somebody from Chile and Peru. Then it goes on to say, to which Humboldt adds that the American race contains nations whose features differ as essentially from one another as those of the Circassians, Moors, and the Persians. But all these people are of one and the same race and readily recognized as such, notwithstanding their differences of feature and complexion, and the American nations present a precisely parallel case. So it's saying right here that just like the Circassians, Moors, and the Persians, that these people, now originally I'm not talking about the bleached out Circassians, the bleached out Moors, or the bleached out Persians. We talking about the original people. But it just goes on to say that how they don't differ much in feature and complexion, and how the Americans present precisely the same case. So although we may look a little different, it's saying that we still all come from the same father. So this is why a lot of those Hebrew brothers and sisters, they talk about who your father comes from, or who your father is. Not necessarily discounting the woman, but it is showing that the father or the seed is more so how you track and follow the ancestry of a person, okay? So moving on real quick, I want to talk about, remember I was telling you all about Moses a little bit, and we were talking about Mexico. So I'm just going to read you all some more information about how Moses and a lot of these Hebrews and a lot of these people that you calling Indians, it was right here in America. So even when we talk about Moses and the Hebrews, these are so-called Indians. Now that's a mislabel, but you still have to think of it that way. So listen up. Moses, or Tahit Mose, was in America. Now this is what I'm reading right now. It's not coming out the same book. It's coming from another PDF file I got. It said that Moses was in America, and Moses, who was historically Pharaoh Akhenaten, left a statue of himself in San Martin, Pajapan, in an extinct volcano that was the site of an ancient priesthood established by the Egyptian Moors. He also left the only Egyptian-style burial tomb and mummy in North America in Palenque, Mexico, in the Temple of Inscriptions. The hieroglyphics show the Egyptian Ennead on the walls of the temple, and even show the hieroglyphics of Votan as having the same attributed physical handicap as noted Pharaoh Akhenaten possessed. The handicap was a part of the ancient Egyptian belief and was attributed to Horus or Hippocrates, as seen in the hieroglyphics of Pakal in the west and Akhenaten in the east. So it's just showing you how the Egyptian burial tombs are actually designed a lot like the same burial tombs found in Mexico, and they are connecting the Aboriginal Moor Moses to Mexico. Okay, moving on. The purposes of these voyages was to find the lost civilization of their ancestors, who resided in what historically was called Ta Neteru or Yaru, the land of the gods, also called Atlantis. So just another little side note real quick. When you all hear about Atlantis, Atlantis basically is the connection or the supercontinent of North, Central, South America and Africa, and the northwest part of so-called Europe. Let me repeat. Atlantis is the supercontinent of North, Central, and South America, Africa, and Europe. Okay, and it was also had surrounding islands. That is Atlantis. Noble Drew Ali, as the initiator of the motion of recovering this great legacy of ancient history, sought to nationalize the so-called Negroes and blacks under the banner of our ancient nation of peace known as Islam. So what you all got to remember is that, to wrap this tape up, that the Aboriginal Americans, although we are all Aboriginal Americans or so-called black people, that we all look different, but nevertheless we come from the same father. Okay. And the second thing is that we need to get out of this whole, oh, my hair this is way, or in other words, like trying to separate black people based on like features, like hair and shit like that, or eye color. Is like, that's not it. If both of your parents are so-called Aboriginal people or black people, then that's what you are. I mean, that's just what you are. If one of your parents, you know what I'm saying, is so-called black and one of them is not, then you are a so-called mixed person. Now we can all probably agree or disagree on, like, if the father is black or if the mother is black and all that. The only reason why I say that, it's kind of going off of the seed, because whenever I put an apple seed in the ground, an apple grows. I don't really ever take the time to look at the type of soil I grew it in. So that's why I'm always saying that the child is going to be black if the father is black, because the seed is. It could be grown in some brown soil, but that don't necessarily mean it may be a black child. So, if a Caucasian male put his seed inside of a black female, that's just like putting a peach seed inside of the ground. It can't really grow nothing but a peach. So although it may grow a peach that look a little brown, it's still a peach. And just like with mulatto people that have a Caucasian father, yeah, they look a little melanated, but they still a Caucasian, But that's just my thing. That's just how I deal with it on a more biological, understanding. I don't do that whole one drop rule and we are all one. Let mulatto people be their own group of people, because they are, you know what I'm saying? Like, and they gonna have to decide what they feel like more anyway. But that's the boy Blackbeard. I just want to drop this shit, you know what I'm saying, dealing with the Aboriginal American identity, because it's been lost, but we slowly finding it. But y'all stay tuned for the next one. I'm out.